Hello everyone and welcome to today's video. Before we get into today's video, make sure you guys like and subscribe. So today we are going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to do a video that I've never done before, actually. A video that I don't know if y'all are going to enjoy it or not. Hopefully you do. But it's going to be a video about how I would vote in every single presidential election from 1960. So let's just jump right in. Let's make this not terribly long, but also not too short. So, starting off, we have 1960, and it was the end of the Eisenhower administration. Now, Dwight Eisenhower, a lot of people know him as Ike. He served two terms as president of the United States. And he was extremely good president. My favorite president. Fun fact: my favorite president of all time to be fact. Um, and he did a lot of good for the United States of America. Very good president. He is, like I said, my favorite president of all time. Probably will stay that unless we get someone extremely good in the next, well, however long I live my life. But if the United States lasts that long, if we get someone even better, I doubt we will, but it'll be interesting to see. But anyway, Dwight Eisenhower is my favorite president. He did a lot of good when he was a general for World War II and when he was the president of the United States. And his vice president for the 8 years he was in was a former senator from California, Richard Nixon, who ran in 1960 against the popular John F. Kennedy, a senator from Massachusetts. Now, Richard Nixon chose for his running mate Henry Cabot Lodge Jr., an ambassador to the United Nations at the time, and John F. Kennedy chose Lyndon Johnson for his running mate, who he was, in my opinion, it was a good choice for electoral purposes to get elected, but I'm not a fan of Lyndon Johnson. Never have been and never will be. Um, Henry Cabot Lodge Jr. was a good choice for Nixon, not as strong as a VP as I would like him to be, but he was okay. And Richard Nixon with Eisenhower, he served with Eisenhower. He helped him get elected. He was a smart choice for Eisenhower, and the fact that he worked on the Eisenhower administration was in the heart of the Eisenhower administration. I can't turn him down. I like Ike. It's just how I am. I think the majority of Americans like Ike, and Richard Nixon, he likes Ike. So I agree on him on that. He's very experienced. He's done a lot of good. He did a lot of good while he was senator, and he's very experienced being a senator and a vice president, and so he had a lot for him. But John F. Kennedy was young. He was new. He was a new spirit, and he just had that kind of like young person vibe. He kind of had that way of like grasping more independent voters. He was more liberal in a lot of things, but he was still fairly conservative. Now his VP pick was Lyndon Johnson, like I said earlier. I don't like Lyndon Johnson. Never been a fan of him. Never will be. He was very racist. He was very pro segregation. He was not good on foreign policy. He sent troops overseas to Vietnam when he said he wouldn't. Just a lot of bad things that he did. And that would just turn me away from John F. Kennedy. Like I like John F. Kennedy, but his VP pick would have put me away. Turned me away from him. So in this scenario, 1960, Richard Nixon gets my vote. So moving on to 1964. Now, 1964 was Lyndon Baines Johnson versus Barry Goldwater. Now, Lyndon Johnson is the incumbent president of the United States at the time because he took office upon John F. Kennedy's assassination in 1963, and Lyndon Johnson. This is one of the reasons why I wouldn't have voted for John Kennedy because I don't I VP picks are a very big thing for me. If a president passes, if a president dies, that VP pick is going to take the remainder of the term. If he doesn't run for the next election, then that's his choice, his or her choice. But the fact that they have to serve, if you don't like the VP pick, you might not want to vote for him. It's just my take on it. So you had Lyndon Johnson, who chose for his vice president pick in 1964 was Hubert Humphrey, and you had versus Barry Goldwater, he did horrible in this election with a complete and total landslide. He got dominated, but he was pretty good on a lot of issues. I like Barry Goldwater on a lot of issues, and he chose William Miller as his running mate. And you can see he only won 6 states against Lyndon Johnson's 44 states plus the District of Columbia. So a complete and total landslide, as you can see. But Barry Goldwater, he was good on issues. I liked him, and I would vote for Barry Goldwater just because I couldn't stand myself to vote for Lyndon Johnson. So yeah, moving on to 1968. 1968, Richard Nixon was back for another run, and he's better than ever. So it's Richard Nixon versus Hubert Humphrey versus George Wallace. Now George Wallace was for the American Independent Party. He's from Alabama. He chose Curtis Lee May as his vice president, his running mate, and he won. He won 5 states. It was pretty good for an independent candidate. And we have Hubert Humphrey for the Democratic Party, the incumbent vice president at the time. He chose Edmund Muskie for his running mate. His home state is Minnesota. His home state was in Minnesota. And Richard Nixon, like I said back, he chose Spiro Agnew for his running mate. Now Spiro Agnew was a very good choice. He's from the state of Maryland, my home state. I like Spiro Agnew. He's a good governor. He did very well as governor, and like I said, running mates really do matter. I like Spiro Agnew, and with that being said, I also like Richard Nixon. Richard Nixon was he was very much I guess that we could say he had a lot of experience. He was a senator, a vice president, and then he was elected president of the United States. So he's got a lot for him, and he was able to win with 301 electoral votes to Hubert Humphrey's 191 to George Wallace's 46 electoral votes. So in this scenario, Richard Nixon would have my vote. I would vote for Richard Nixon and a Spiro Agnew ticket. They would get my vote because I don't like Hubert Humphrey. He's cringe. He's racist, like Lyndon Johnson, and it's just not my type. So moving on to 1972 was a complete and total landslide for Richard Nixon. He ran against George McGovern, who was from South Dakota. George McGovern only won 1 state plus the District of Columbia. That would be the state of Massachusetts, and Richard Nixon won with 520 electoral votes to George McGovern's 17. So that's a lot. Richard Nixon carried 49 states, and he only lost the District of Columbia and Massachusetts. In this in this election, there'd be no doubt about it. Richard Nixon gets my vote. Let's move on to 1976. 1976 would be between Jimmy Carter and Gerald Ford. And the reason why you can see right here is that who's Gerald Ford? I've never heard of him before. Yeah, he is the current vice president of the United States at the time, and you're probably thinking, wait, current vice president, wasn't that Spiro Agnew? No, Spiro Agnew resigned in 1973 due to scandals he had while governor of Maryland. Sadly, but nonetheless, Gerald Ford was picked by Richard Nixon to replace him. And then in 1974, Richard Nixon resigned, and then Gerald Ford became the President of the United States. He was running in 1976 to win himself a full term to President of the United States against Jimmy Carter, and Gerald Ford's running mate in 1976 was Bob Dole, and Jimmy Carter's running mate was Walter Mondale. So, as we can see here, Gerald Ford picked up the Midwest area. He swept the Midwest area, winning California with his 45 electoral votes, but he did lack in the South and Northeast area with Ohio and Pennsylvania, the Rust Belt, and a lot of southern areas too, Texas. But Jimmy Carter being from Georgia, he had a lot of appeal down south, and that's why he ran. In this election, I would vote for Gerald Ford, just because I liked him. I liked what his policies were on most issues, and I just didn't like Carter all that much. So we can move on to 1980. Uh, 1980, it's another complete landslide for the Republicans. You had the incumbent president Jimmy Carter running for re-election. He had a lot against him. He was not a good president. He did not do a lot of good for the United States, and he literally was just a letdown for the Democrats. His vice president at the time was Walter Mondale, and he wasn't any better. So, and then you had John B. Anderson for the Independent Party. He's from Louisiana. I mean Illinois, and his running mate was Patrick Lucy, and he only won. He didn't win any electoral votes, but he won 6.6% of the vote. And you had Ronald Reagan, who was a complete Chad of this era. He was like Eisenhower, and Eisenhower paved the way for Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan was a very good candidate. It was a very good candidate, very good president, and he won with 44 states. He won 489 electoral votes to Jimmy Carter's 49. And his running mate was George Herbert Walker Bush, George Bush Sr. So it was a decent choice back then. Not my favorite. Not my favorite pick for VP, but nonetheless, it was a good solid pick, good solid pickup for the Republicans, and he did very well. In this election, I would vote for Ronald Reagan, just like the majority of the country did, and just because Jimmy Carter was so unpopular with many many things, foreign policy aspect, and just many. I can just keep going. It was just a lot against Jimmy Carter. Moving on to 1984, you have Ronald Reagan running for re-election. Now, the majority of the country agree that Ronald Reagan was a very good president. It's a complete blowout election for Ronald Reagan against the former Vice President Walter Mondale. Now, Walter Mondale was the Vice President under the Carter administration, and he picked Geraldine Ferraro, a woman for Vice President, and Ronald Reagan picked Herbert Walker Bush for a second time. Now, Ronald Reagan won with 525 electoral votes to Walter Mondale's 13. The biggest electoral landslide in since, I would say, well, I guess it was 1988, but we'll have to look at that. So yeah, we can, and in this election, I would vote for Ronald Reagan, like most of the country did, because he was just such a great president for his first term, and he would continue to serve for a second term. And moving on to 1988, you have uh, George Herbert Walker Bush versus Michael Dukakis. George Herbert Walker Bush, I don't like the Bush family. I don't like the Bush dynasty. George Bush 1, George Bush 2, Jeb Bush, all of the Bushes, I'm not a fan of. I wish that there was another alternative for George Bush. I wish that he didn't win the nomination, but you got to go with what you have. In this election, uh, I would have considered voting for a Democrat if it was a reasonable candidate putting up, and then the Democrats put up Michael Dukakis, and I was like, no, no way, no, no. Why? Why would you put Michael Dukakis up? Uh, Lloyd Bentsen, his running mate, wasn't any better. Dan Quayle was inexperienced and was honestly a letdown for the Bush campaign. Dan Quayle did not do very well. Um, I would say that, I would say that Dan Quayle was inexperienced and was not a very qualified candidate for the office of vice president. And with this being said, with George Bush being very popular vice president, he won with 426 electoral votes to Michael Dukakis's 111. So in this election, I would vote for George Bush, but it was just because I didn't want Michael Dukakis becoming president. And George Herbert Walker Bush is not my choice, and I really wouldn't have felt very enthusiastic to vote for him. So moving on to 1992, this is going to be Bill Clinton against George Herbert Walker Bush versus Ross Perot. And in this election, George Herbert Walker Bush had a lot of bad stuff against him with taxes, regulations. Now, he said in a debate, in 1988. Actually, I don't even. I think it was his Republican nomination speech. He said, "Read my lips, no new taxes." That quote right there that I just said really ruined George Bush in 1992. If we look at the map here, it's a complete and total landslide for Bill Clinton. George Bush did not live up to that promise. No, nowhere close to it. Taxes were up, inflation was up, and it was just a horrible economy. The economy was in shambles, and the people were hurting. Um, Bill Clinton was the governor of Arkansas. You can see why he swooped the South here, and he brought new ideas to the table. And in this election, I don't like Bill Clinton, and I don't like Al Gore, his running mate. I also don't like George Bush. I don't like the Bush dynasty, and I don't like Dan Quayle. But Ross Perot is the independent, and he brought good ideas. He was socially liberal on some occasions, but very conservative a lot. That's why he's an independent. He was tired of big government. He wanted small government, and in this election, I give Ross Perot my vote. Ross Perot really brought new change to the table, and I was, I think a lot of people, I don't like either of the two main party candidates, and in this instance, I would vote for Ross Perot. Now, moving on to 1996, you had Bill Clinton running for re-election against Bob Dole, and again for Ross Perot, but this time Ross Perot was with the Reform Party. Bill Clinton with his running mate Al Gore again to Bob Dole and his running mate Jack Kemp, and you have Ross Perot uh, back for another try, but did a lot worse this go around. And as you can see, Bill Clinton did better. He won 9 more electoral votes, but and the economy was a lot better than it was before. The whole Monica Lewinsky thing would have that whole scandal with that and how disgusting of a person Bill Clinton is. It wouldn't have I wouldn't have wanted to. I wouldn't have been enthusiastic to vote for Bill Clinton, but he did bring back the economy a good bit. He brought jobs back, and he was kind of like the president kind of did stuff for the United States, so he was pretty good. And Bob Dole wasn't too enthusiastic with him, and Jack Kemp, again, I don't really like him all that much. Bob Dole was a moderate, but he didn't bring whole lot of ideas to the table. With that being said, I would vote for Ross Perot for a second time. So coming in the election of 2000, one of the most close elections in American history, and the two worst candidates in my opinion. You had George W. Bush, the senator from Texas, who's the son of George Herbert Walker Bush, against Al Gore, who's the current vice president of the United States, and and George W. Bush picked Dick Cheney as his running mate, and Al Gore picked Joe Lieberman as his running mate. In this election, I honestly don't know who I would vote for. You have Al Gore as incumbent vice president. George Bush. I don't like George Bush. I don't like Al Gore, but this is a hard one. I don't. I really just I really don't like either candidate. This is just a bad situation. Two very unpopular candidates. But in this election, I think I would vote for George Bush just because I would kind of want a Republican in the White House. So moving on in 2004, you have George Bush is running for his reelection against uh, John Kerry. Yikes. John Kerry for president? Oh my goodness. Alright, I don't like George Bush. I didn't like how he handled 9/11, and I don't like how and what he did for America, for the United States. And I would contemplate on voting for a Democrat, depending on which Democrat it was. If it was a better Democrat, more moderate, I could consider it. I was like, all right, the Democrat Party, come on, let's put up someone who really could actually take George Bush down. And then they put up John Kerry, a complete radical communist leftist who is completely insane and wants communism. The Republican Party puts him up. I mean, the Democratic Party puts John Kerry up. That's insane. I would have been torn here, and I don't even know. I would not vote for John Kerry, and I would only vote for George Bush just because I would be afraid of a John Kerry administration. So I would give my vote to George Bush, but only in fear of John Kerry. Moving on to 2008, we have Barack Obama versus John McCain. The Bush administration was in shambles, the economy was in shambles, and it was just not a good spot for Republicans. John McCain, who's a senator from Arizona, picked Sarah Palin as his running mate. The governor of Alaska. I like Sarah Palin. She's good. She was a good governor, and honestly, she's the only reason why I would vote for the John McCain ticket. If it was Sarah Palin with John McCain, I would definitely vote for Sarah Palin. Wouldn't be enthusiastic about John McCain, but she'd be better than Barack Obama, most likely. You have Barack Obama, who ran in 2008 and chose Joe Biden as his running mate. Yeah, not too enthusiastic about Joe Biden. Pretty much a gaffe machine at the time. Barack Obama, I would like Barack Obama's message to rebuild the economy, which was very much needed. And honestly, it would be very obvious that John McCain couldn't do it because Bush couldn't do it. And if Bush couldn't do it, then there's no way John McCain could do it. So with that being said, in this election, I probably would vote for Barack Obama just because I would just need the economy rebuilt. It was a horrible situation, and Americans were really looking for the economy to be fixed. And I think that Barack Obama would actually do very well with that, better than John McCain. Moving on to 2012, we have Barack Obama running against Mitt Romney for his re-election. Now, as we can see here, we have Barack Obama, who's the incumbent president, and he chose Joe Biden again as his running mate. And and Mitt Romney ran with Paul Ryan. Mitt Romney was a governor of Massachusetts. To be surprised, I was surprised when I learned that about Mitt Romney, but he was a governor. He was okay, but he had a couple scandals, and he didn't he was not he was not anything to be excited about. He didn't bring change. He was basically Obama, but for the Republicans in a way. And so in this election, I would have wanted the Republican primary challenger to him, Ron Paul, who ran. I would have loved him to to be the Republican nominee. He probably could almost have taken Barack Obama down, which he was unable to win the nomination. But if he did, I think he probably could have been the next president. To be honest, with just the way that the way that the Obama administration was headed in that direction. Now, I will give Barack Obama this: he did rebuild the economy somewhat, so I give him that. And I would give my vote on. I would actually write in, probably either Rick Santorum or Ron Paul, but probably Ron Paul. I think I would give my vote to Ron Paul just because I like him a lot. Moving on to the 2016 presidential election between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, finally, we have a good Republican candidate to take office. Donald Trump his message was drain the swamp and make America great again. That's all I need, and that's the only reason why I would vote for him. Hillary Clinton, I couldn't stand what a Clinton administration would be like. Tim Kaine was as worse, and and Mike Pence was Trump's VP pick, and Trump's message resonated with a lot of voters. He flipped Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Florida. So that's a lot of states that he was able to flip. I liked his message, and it stuck, and he was able to win, and he did very good. So, moving on to 2020, we have Joe Biden versus Donald Trump. Donald Trump's running for his re-election against Joe Biden, the former vice president of the United States. And in a shocker, Joe Biden won this election beating Donald Trump with 306 electoral votes to Trump's 232. And Trump was decently popular. Joe Biden was kind of like bringing change to the table. I would have, I would have not have, I would not be enthusiastic to vote for Joe Biden or his running mate Kamala Harris. But I like Trump's message. He got a good bit done in his first term. He wasn't able to get enough done as much as we wanted him to, just because of the Rhino loser Republicans in the House and the Senate. So in this election, I would vote for Trump, but hopefully he would have done a little bit more in his second term if he had won. So with that being said, thank you all for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. This was a new video that I haven't done before, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. Make sure you guys like the video and subscribe for more videos. And if you guys like this video, it took a long time to make. It's a long video, and so with that being said, thank you, God bless, and God bless America.